Hello guys and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to look at Adobe After Effects for complete beginners. So without taking much of our time, let's get started.
So all you need to do is to start by opening your Adobe After Effects. Once you open it afresh, this is what you'll be welcomed with. It's a fresh platform. Okay, so all you need to do is just to go ahead and create a new project, or if you have an existing project, you can navigate around your computer and try to open it directly by coming here. So let's start by creating a new project. And this brings us to a brand new Adobe After Effects workspace. Okay, this is what we call the workspace. The entire thing you see here is called a workspace. And there are basically different kind of sections in this workspace. For example, to the left over here, top left, we have the project panel. Okay, this is where you have all your project media, you import everything over here. And then next you have the composition panel or the preview panel. This is where you can make a preview of what you are working on. And then down here you have the timeline or the render queue panel. This is generally where you have your footage edited, where you add all the text, you add all the animations and so on. This is where you bring them up. And then at the top here, I call this section auxiliary panel, okay, because there are so many sections of it, subsections, and they all have their own usage. So I term them auxiliary panel. Okay, so later on you get to know what they are and what they do in our editing process and what kind of functions they add. At the top left over here also you have some series of icons. These icons are great right now because we have not imported anything into the media. Okay, we have not started editing anything. So as we start, we get to know each and every one of them and what they do to our editing process. And then at the top right over here, you have, just like in Adobe Premiere Pro, you have some basic tabs. For example, you have the default tab because this is the default view. Whenever you open your Adobe After Effects, this is the default view. And you have the review tab. Just like in Adobe Premiere Pro, once you try to move around, you see the different sections. It just simply moves in the sections. You have the Learn tab where you can learn some basics of After Effects, and then you have the small screen tab. What it simply does is it just moves the different components around. Okay, and then we have the standard tab, also moving some of the key things around. And then we have this library. Library contains a lot of things. If you come to these small two arrows over here, you have a number of things that you can enable in the auxiliary panels. For example, you can enable the effects, and you can see all the different effects that we have in Adobe After Effects. You can see the channel 4D, create to generate, the expression, and all that, the different various effects that we have. You can as well search for a given effect also direct if you don't know exactly where to find it, or if you know, you can just move accordingly to search for it within the effect controls. And then you can come back to the same arrows. You can enable the paint if you want to enable it, and then you can come back to the same arrow if you want to enable the text feature. And you can see the various text properties over here, which you can basically play around with to edit your text, to add properties, and to add basic functions in text. So this is just like in Premiere Pro, like I said. And at any given point you can always return back to default. And if you have messed around with some of these components, some of these different features, maybe you've moved them around, or by mistake you made a mistake of closing down the project panel, for example, and the whole thing got scattered, or you moved the timeline panel to somewhere and everything got scattered, you can always come back to the default settings over here. You just come to these three lines, you just click on it and say reset to save layout, will bring it back to the default one. Okay, so you just take note of these. There's no need for you to panic when you make mistakes, or when you try to close, or when you shift things around. For example, if you want to move things around, you don't want to have your timeline over here, all you need to do is just to drag it, select and drag it, and then you can move it to the sideways, something like this. Or you don't want to see the project panel over here, you want to bring it down, you can just select it and bring it over here. You can see you've just basically scattered everything, but with just a simple click you can just bring it back. Simply come to default, reset to save layout, will get you back to where you started. Okay, so this is basically how it is. And another thing that I want to point out is, in cases when you are working, or I'm trying to explain something and you didn't find it in your own After Effects workstation, you can always come over to Windows. Over here you have series of characters here that are not enabled. If you don't see a given character, you can come all the way and enable it from here. For example, this paint option, is not in this one at the moment, you can just come over here and enable it, and you can see it over here. So if we are talking about paint, for example, along the way, and you seem to not see it in your own panel, you can easily rush down to Windows over here, and then you can come down and enable paint just like so. Or if you want to see Lumetri scopes and you don't see it over here, you can just come to Windows and just navigate around and just enable Lumetri scopes, and you can see it over here. Alright, and at any given point you want to disable all this, you can just still come back to Windows, disable the paint, and come back to Windows and disable the Lumetri scopes along the way. So thank you for watching. So after going through the basic components, the different parts of the Adobe After Effects workspace, the next thing is to save the project. So to save a project, all you need to do is to come to File over here and just come to Save As, and you just come all the way to Save As. Over here, you just give it a name as an After Effects project. For example, you can name it Project 1 and just navigate around within your system to define wherever you want to save it. For example, I just want to save it in this After Effects file where I have all of my footage. It's usually advisable to save your After Effects project in a file where you have all your media footage located. So you can just give the name, specify location, and just go ahead and click on save. Okay, so after you have saved the project, the next thing is to import your footage into After Effects, and there are two ways you can do that. You can easily drag and drop, and the second way is you can just come all the way to project panel over here, just double click and then navigate around within your computer where you have saved those clips, and then select them and then import them directly. So in my own case, it's the same folder where I have all of my After Effects projects saved. So I can just select, click, and just hold the shift key and select the last one. So I can just select all of them and just go ahead and click on open to just import everything. So one thing you should pay attention to is you have everything imported. You can just come over here, just move this a little bit so you can have a clear view of what is inside. So you can see the details in terms of the file type. This is MP3, and then these are other media, and then you can have the sizes, you can have the frame rate, what frame rates are you importing in, and then you can have the timing, the in point, and then the out point. You can see everything. And once you select on any of the clip, you can see a preview of it over here, and you can see the clip properties also located. You can see everything over here. So in cases when you don't have, or you don't want a specific property of a keyframe or of a clip, you can easily change it on your own. So this is how to import a media into After Effects. The next thing is to create a composition. So what is a composition? A composition is just like a sequence in Adobe Premiere Pro. The way you create a sequence in Adobe Premiere Pro is the same way you create a composition in Adobe After Effects. It's simply where all your footage lies in. Okay, so this is just like a project where all your footage is going to be located. So there are two methods to do it. The first one is you can create new composition directly from here, or a new composition from a specific footage that you've imported. But what I usually do is I just go ahead and come over here to this small folder down here, create a new composition. I just click on it, and then this brings us to the composition settings. So the first thing I usually do is to give the composition name, which I can name maybe Adobe After Effects 1. So I just give it a name, and then you can come all the way to, you have three basic settings: the basic, the advanced, and the render settings. So in the basic settings, you can check on the presets. Usually you can check and select these settings according to what kind of video you are producing, for what kind of social media you are producing, or is it for course content creation, or for YouTube channel, or for any social media, maybe Instagram or TikTok. Depending, you just select the settings accordingly. Okay, what settings are you using? Usually what I go for is the HDTV 1080 to 9.97 frame rate per second, which is usually good for YouTube, which is what I usually make my videos for. Okay, so you can just go ahead and select it accordingly. Then you have the aspect ratio. You can change the aspect ratio according to your content. What kind of content are you creating? My own is 1920 by 1080. You can see it, which is the aspect ratio 16:9. You're free to change it if you don't want. And then the pixels, usually I leave it as square pixels, and the aspect ratio I leave it at default. Okay, so you can change the frame rate down here from 29.97 to anything. Okay, you can change the drop frame. I usually keep everything at default. The resolution also, I keep it at full. Later on, I will show you how to change the resolution to fit in your content and to be able to fit in according to the speed and capacity of your system. Then you have the start time code. This is usually at 00, and then the duration is the default. Okay, what duration, how much duration do you want your clip to stay? How long is your clip that is you are going to be editing in After Effects? The default is usually 30 seconds. The timing here is 0 hours, for example 10 minutes, 30 seconds, and 00 frame rate. Okay, so I usually make it longer. I set this to 10 minutes so that you can have 10 minutes. You can always come back to the composition settings and change it accordingly depending on the message or the content that you have. If it is longer, you can come back and make it longer. If it is shorter, you can come back and make it shorter according to the footage that you have. Then we have the background color. You can click on this to select the background color, to select on any size, okay, any color. You can navigate around to change the color according to your content or according to your brand. But for me, I don't use any background color because most of the footage that I import are going to overlap with that particular background, and you will not be able to see any background accordingly. So I don't set anything as regards the background. I leave everything at default. I have black background and I work with it like that. Okay, so the next is the advanced and the 3D renderer. I don't touch anything in the advanced, so also I don't touch anything in the 3D renderer. Okay, I leave everything at default. So once you are set with all these basic features, you can just go ahead and click on OK to create your first composition, which you have just done. And what you see is you have created the first project composition. Over here you can see it, Adobe After Effects 1, and you can see the composition panel over here, which is the preview panel where you can see what you are editing, and then you can see it also over here. Okay, the composition have been created. So this is a composition, so be mindful of that. And another way to create a composition is you can easily drag a footage and drop it in this very folder. You can just drop it and it's going to create a composition for you directly, very easily. And you can see the composition, it's going to be named according to the name of the footage. Okay, so this is the composition, but it's named after the footage that you've created the composition from. So just be very mindful of this. It's very, very crucial and useful when you master everything on as regards to composition creating. So once you have your composition, you can see it down here. You've just imported the composition. What I usually do over here is I usually press the letter S to have the scale, so that I make sure everything is scaled to 100 and my footage are all scaled to 100. So you can see scaling over here. Okay, later I will show you how to navigate and bring in different functions accordingly. So this is very basic on how to create a composition. You can see now the footage is there. You can navigate around and see what is happening inside with your playhead. Okay, within the timeline you can move around and see. So one thing you should pay attention to is at any given point, if depending on this capacity of your system, if you want to reduce the resolution, at least for you to work on the footage until you are done, then you can export it in the full resolution. You can always come here and change it to maybe 1/4 so that it reduces the resolution for you, and then the previewing power of the system becomes very easy, and the system can easily preview around very easily. So another way to do it, you can come to the preview panel over here and you can see resolution over here, and you can just change it accordingly. Okay, you can change it to full, half, third, or thereabout. You can do that accordingly, and it will change the resolution of the footage while you still work on the footage. So basically, this is how to create a composition and to import your clip into the composition. You can see we have two compositions that we've created right now, the production ID and the Adobe After Effects one. Even though we didn't put any video clip on the Adobe After Effects, you can just drag any footage of your choice. For example, this one, you can just easily drag it and drop it into the timeline. Okay, and you can see it over here just created. So you can just navigate with the playhead to have a preview of what it is. Okay, so this is basically how to create a composition and then import your footage into the timeline and then start your basic editing. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to look at that is extremely important in Adobe After Effects is the feature called transform. Okay, transform is very common. You might have used it in Adobe Premiere Pro. We can show you how to use it also in Adobe After Effects. So right now we've imported a footage, we've created a composition, and we have it now imported into our timeline. So all you need to do to enable the transform feature is to come over here to the Adobe After Effects project panel. You can come to this small arrow, you just click on it and you see transform coming up down here just like so. And when you click on the transform, you will have the 5 basic transform features that are available for After Effects. These are also very common in Adobe Premiere Pro. We have the anchor point, the position, the scaling, the rotation, and opacity. So we can explain all of them, what they mean and how they affect our footage. You can apply each and every one of them to all of your footage, be it a media, picture, a video, or a text even. Sometimes you can apply these various transform features and have it work perfectly. So let's start with the first one from the bottom, which is opacity. From the name, it just simply means how transparent the image is. So for example, this is at 100%. If we try to zero, it just simply shows how opacity the opacity decreases, or how see-through it is from that video. So if you have any clip behind it, you will be very easily able to see what is behind this particular video clip by decreasing the opacity or increasing it accordingly. So this is the opacity. It increases or decrease. You can increase or decrease it to be able to see through that particular clip that you're working on. So let's bring it back to 100. The next is the rotation. So everyone knows what rotation does. Of course, it rotates the image around the anchor point. For example, the anchor point is the center point. I'll explain that in detail, but simply rotation, what it does is it simply rotates the image or the clip around anchor point. Okay, so let's do Ctrl Z to have it set to normal, but then rotation is fully understood. Now the next thing is scaling. You can scale up or down. You can just simply scale directly, or you can zoom out. Okay, you can zoom in or zoom out. This is scaling. And what you can see when you are playing around with scaling is you have this linking button over here, which means the X and Y axis are both linked when using the scale. So which means you can zoom in and out from both angles, from X and Y, and the proportion is going to be the same. Is going to increase or decrease accordingly using both methods, using both of them linked together. We want to unlink this, which means the X-axis is going to zoom in or is going to scale up alone. Okay, or the Y-axis is going to zoom in alone, just like that. Okay, so but if you have it linked, it means it's going to zoom in and out together. Okay, so just take note of this to have it where we started. Okay, so the next is the position. Of course, position has to do with the X and Y axis. Position, you can move it to the left or along the Y axis or along the X axis. You can see, you can just simply move it by just increasing or decreasing the numbers. And the same way you can play around with the X axis, you can in the Y axis, you can increase or decrease accordingly. Okay, so movement or position simply defines the X and Y position of the video clip or audio clip or any media clip that you have. Last but not the least is the anchor point. Anchor point is usually the position or the center of the clip. Okay, the center of the clip from which all the other actions are being taken from. So you can see it over here. So this means this is the center of the clip. So at any given point, if you look at the opacity or look at the scaling of this clip, you can see it is. So let's try to link it, and you can see it is coming up or growing out from that anchor point, which is the center point of the clip. You can see it's growing from there, and at any given point you may decide to move it around. You can move the anchor point around by coming to this pan behind anchor point option. Okay, or you can use the shortcut key Y. Once you click on this, you will be able to move the anchor point to any location of your choice. If you move it to this location and leave it there, then it's going to scale up from that particular location. So let's try to link it up, and then let's try to scale. You can see it's scaling from that particular point, and you can scale out from that particular point. So that's the beauty of anchor point. You have the option also to hold down the control key in Windows or the command key on Mac after dragging the anchor point, and it should be able to snap at any given point, maybe towards the edges. You can snap just like so at any given point, and you can snap it, let's say, to the end of it here. And let's try to play around with the rotation, for example, rotation feature, and you can see it's going to rotate along that particular anchor point that is defined. And you can it applies to all the other features. Okay, scaling, positioning is going to be along the particular anchor point that you have defined. So let's take it back to normal and take it back to center, because that's the default one and that's the most easiest one. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to look at is keyframes. Okay, we can add keyframes just like we do in Adobe Premiere Pro. You can add keyframes to define what kind of transform do you want a particular clip to have at a given point. So for example, let's talk about opacity. Assuming at this point I want this to go opaque or to be transparent, okay, from this full opacity 100% to 0 at some point, so I have to use keyframes. So hitting on the keyframe to add a keyframe, you can see it has just added a keyframe on the timeline. This is 100%, and I can move to a given location, maybe up to this point, and I add another keyframe, or I can just come over here and decrease the opacity to, let's say, 0 up to this point. This is 0, and you can see it has given us another keyframe. So let's try to play it and see what it means. You can move from full opacity to 0. Okay, so let's try to hit the space bar, and you can see the transformation from full opacity down to 0. Okay, so you can reduce the speed of the opacity, the change, by bringing the keyframes closer. If you bring them closer, the opacity is going to be pretty fast, just like so. Let's try it. Okay, this is quite fast, and if you make it longer, it's going to take longer time for it to occur. So for example, this is longer, so you try to play it, and you can see the decrease. It's quite gradual, and before it gets to the endpoint. Okay, so this is keyframes. It's very important to master it. You can get very creative and interesting as you move on, adding animations to your text and so on. So later on, I will show you in details how to use these keyframes and apply different kind of transformation functions to them, so that your video can look fantastic. But for this tutorial, I think that does it for transform and keyframe at the basic level. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is keyboard shortcuts in Adobe After Effects. Okay, so keyboard shortcuts are very useful when editing your footage in Adobe After Effects. It makes you become much more productive and makes editing process very easy and fast. Okay, so just invest just few moments of your time to learn about the keyboard shortcuts, so that you can be able to perform very fast, and even editing becomes very easy along the way. To access keyboard shortcuts in Adobe After Effects, all you need to do in Mac, you just come to edit over here, and you can see keyboard shortcuts down here. So you just click, and you can see everything just like the way it is in Adobe Premiere Pro. Everything is just listed. You can hold down the command key to see whatever is allowed over here, or you can see from the keyboard whatever is allowed and whatever is not allowed, or what any feature does for your editing process. And you can search for any feature from here. Okay, you can just come over here to search for any feature that you are trying to target. You can check the command key over here, and all these features you'll be able to see what do they do to your editing process. So you can just check on any, and you can just search for any feature, any command of your choice. For example, you can search for delete, which is usually clear. Okay, you can see it clear over here, and you can easily select. You can just use clear on your keyboard, or you can do forward delete on your keyboard also if you are using Mac or thereabout, and you can press on delete to delete as well. Okay, for you to add any shortcut key, you can just come over here, for example on this clear, and just hit on anywhere, and you can just add any letter. For example, I can add the letter D to this to be able to delete at any given point. So I just added D, and you can see it has added. So once I press on OK, it's going to take D as a delete button. Whenever I click on D, it's going to delete a particular clip that I'm working on. So let's have an example of it. So on this clip, assuming I'm working on this clip, and when I press the delete button, okay, so assuming I select this clip, whenever I press the delete button, it's going to delete this particular key for me. Whenever I press the letter D, okay, the letter D is going to delete the clip directly for me. So this is the function of the basic function of the keyboard shortcuts. There are lots of them. There are many you can use to create your own shortcuts to be able to fasten your work or thereabout. The most interesting ones that I use generally in my editing process are, for example, instead of you to come over and click on this arrow to have the transform, and then click on the transform to have all these features, I usually have the shortcut keys to enable them. For example, I use the letter S to enable the scaling transform. I use the letter S, and you see it brings us this scaling transform. Okay, I can hit the letter T for opacity, and I can hit the letter R for rotation. Okay, you can see I can hit letter R for rotation, and I can hit letter A for anchor point. Okay, these are just default keyboard shortcuts, but I find them quite useful and helpful whenever you are editing your footage. So letter S can bring in the scale, letter T can bring in the opacity, letter R can bring in the rotation, and letter A can bring in the anchor point. And if you want to put on some of them at the same time, for example, you want to put anchor point and maybe opacity, you just have to hold down the shift key and press the letter T, and it's going to put anchor point and opacity at the same time. If you want to put maybe rotation also to this, you just press the shift key and please press on R, and then you can have them all at the same time. Okay, so another keyboard shortcut that I use is letter U, which I use to solo any keyframe that I have or anything that I'm working on in terms of the properties. Okay, so for example, if I press on letter U, everything goes, and specifically if I'm working on the scale and I press on letter U, it goes, and I press on letter U again. For example, if I'm working on scaling and I added some scale, if I have others, for example rotation, and then maybe I have opacity, and once I press on letter U, it's going to solo everything except the one that I'm working on, which is scaling at this point. Okay, it's just going to bring in scale that I'm working on. It's very handy when you have too many transform features you're working on. It's going to hide on the other ones and just show you the one that you're working on. So letter U can be very handy as it solo all the other keyframes you're working on. Another one I usually use is the letter V to always return down to the selection tool. For example, if I'm typing something, and I always want to at this point want to go back to the selection tool so that I'll be able to move my clip or make a selection. I can always press on the letter V to go back to the selection tool, and you can see now I can hold and drag and move around very easily. With the letter V, you can return back to the selection tool. Alright, so another thing is I can hit the command T to enable the text. For example, I can just hit the command and letter T to enable the text tool, and I can type anything I want. Okay, so you can see I can type anything with the command T. It's very useful. And the pen tool, I can enable it also with the letter G. So I return back to the selection tool, I can press on the G to enable the pen tool, and you can see I can be able to draw at any given point. I can draw anything. Okay, maybe I draw this polygon and I can have it for myself. Okay, so at any given point you may always decide to draw any shape of your choice. Letter G can enable the pen tool, so you'll be able to do all that very easily. Okay, so the letter Q, once I press on the letter Q, can enable the rectangle tool, and you'll be able to draw rectangles or circles or thereabout. Okay, any given point. So when you enable the letter Q, you can always come over here and you can see you can click on this ellipse tool. When you click and hold, you have the option to be able to enable the rectangle tool or the rounded rectangle tool or the ellipse tool or the polygon tool or the star tool. You can enable any one of them from here and you'll be able to use it very nicely. So you can see right now it is the star tool. You can do that anywhere, and you can do also other things. So just hold down the star tool and you can enable the polygon tool, and you can draw just like so very nicely. Okay, so this enables you to draw different kind of shapes. So basically this is just the most important ones that I use in terms of the basic editing, but you're free to go ahead and customize yours according to your liking. I have shown you how to customize the keyboard shortcuts, but the basic ones that I use are the transform features, the U for the solo, and the V for the selection tool, the command T for the text tool, the G for the pen tool, and the Q for the rectangle tool or thereabout. Okay, so just feel free to give it a try and try to see what you can change to have the best shortcut keys to be able to edit very fast. Please try to learn about the shortcut keys because it's very useful and handy, and it makes your editing process pretty fast. So that does it for this tutorial. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Alright, so the next thing is we're going to learn how to animate our text in Adobe After Effects. So to start animating our text, you have to create a composition. I've just shown a very quick way to create a composition. For example, you can come all the way here and you can click create a composition, and you can just give your details. For example, you can see text animation, and then you can specify the other basic properties like the aspect ratio, the presets you can check from here, and all that's the frame rate, the start time code usually at 0, and then the duration that it's going to take. Usually you can leave it at the default one. For example, in this case we are going with 30 seconds, which is quite okay for me. And you can define the background from here as well if you want, but for now, let's say we are creating a composition from this. You can say okay. There are two ways you can create a composition. You can create like that, or you can come to composition over here and say new composition, and it will do the same way. Okay, so this is text animation. So the first thing you need to do before you start bringing in text is to make sure you get your workspace very nicely prepared. Okay, so the top right over here, there are a bunch of features that you actually don't need to conduct all your editings in Adobe After Effects, especially when dealing with text. For example, you have info over here, you have audio properties over here, you have preview. We may need it because sometimes when the system got slower, if you are working on a system that is a bit slow and it start to lag, you can change the resolution from here. From automatic, you can make it half, third, or quarter accordingly. Okay, so we're going to need preview, and then we have the effects and presets. Okay, we are going to need effects and presets, and then we have libraries. We don't need libraries, and we need characters because we are going to deal with text. We need characters, and we need paragraph. We need all these, and we don't need tracker actually at this point, and we don't need content fill at this point. So we can just click to remove, close panel, and then we can come to info as well, close panel, and we can come to audio. We don't need all this at this point. Close the panel, and we can have preview. I said we need preview, and then we have effects. Library, we don't need library, so we can just come over here and close it. And then so what we need is characters, paragraphs, and maybe effects. Okay, and preview. So for us to have it fully opened, you can just drag on character, bring it down over here, and just release it, and you can see it is opened. And you can have a paragraph also. You can just grab it and bring it down over here. You can release it, so you can see it is open right now. And then you can have maybe your effects, drag it down here, and you can release it, and you can see the effects over here. So all the things that we need are actually opened over here, so it makes our work pretty fast and easy to work on. Okay, so you can bring this down here, and then we can have the character and paragraph. Very close attention, because these are what we need when we are dealing with text. So the first thing we need to do, or we need to start, is to just double click on this rectangle tool to create the fill that we need. For example, if you don't have, or you don't like the color you have on the fill, you can always come over here, click and select the color according to your brand, or according to what you're working on, or what you want to actually work on directly. So you can just go ahead and select and change the color accordingly. Right now I like this color, so I'm going to go with it. Then we have this stroke by the side over here. So stroke is what you have by the side. You can just click on this, and you can enable it or disable however you want it. Okay, you can enable or disable the stroke, and then you can see the properties over here. You can increase or decrease the stroke width. So right now I don't want it, so I can remove it, or you can increase it or decrease it accordingly. I don't need the stroke for this text animation, so I just remove it. And the next thing is to start adding text to this our canvas. So to add a text, I usually use the Command T to enable the text tool. Okay, so I just click on this, and then I can start typing my text. For example, epic mentorship. I want to write epic mentorship, but I have written epic, so I need to duplicate this. I select the text down here, you can see it over here. I can just hit on Command D to duplicate this, and now I can move this text around to another point, or I can bring it down and say mentorship. I can double click now and write mentorship. Okay, so this is very nice. So you can see we can select both of them at the same time. A very quick thing that I want to share with you is, people often ask me, how do you easily click out from text in Adobe After Effects? Because right now, if you try to move out, or you try to click somewhere, you are going to start a new text. So what I usually tell people is, the first and the best way to click out of the text in Adobe After Effects is just to come into the timeline over here and just click on it. Or you can hold the Command and Enter to move out of text, and you can always hit the letter V to return to the selection tool, and then you can move the text accordingly. Okay, so you can centralize them accordingly. You can just move them around to make sure they are centralized easily. And you can use the X and Y axis as well, and you can worry about the text properties, for example the font style. You can see different kind of fonts from here. You can select from the various font styles that we have. The text color, you can change the color as you saw, which from here you can just select on any color and change accordingly. And then you have the sizing. Okay, you can play around with the size. You can increase or decrease the size accordingly. Just play around with it. There's so much to look at, so much to learn and play around with around here. So just try to look at these properties and see how you can edit and come out with the best feature that you have possible. So one thing you will need to pay attention to also when you are moving a text, it's better to hold down the shift key so it enables you to move vertically and horizontally in a very professional way. So holding down the shift key can help you in movement of the text very nicely. Okay, so this is basically how to bring in text and add it into the canvas. Okay, so let's try to see what kind of animations you can put so that your text can look kind of professional and nice. To some people it's very basic. They can put in some very boring things like opacity to make their text stand out or to create an animation. So what they do is they just create keyframes. I've shown in the previous video on how to create keyframes. So to create a keyframe, what people used to do is to just come over here, for example, and then they come back here and hit on opacity, letter T, and they bring out the opacity. So at this point they say this is the highest point, this is where they want the opacity to be 100 and 100, and then they just hit on opacity on the two text. Okay, so this is the first text and then this is the second text. So they create an opacity over here at 100 and then they bring it down to 0 and then 0 the opacity. Okay, at this point they 0 it, they move it down to 0, right, to 0 and to 0 as well. Okay, so when you start moving them, you can see the opacity moves from 0. The text can come in from 0 to 100, something like this. You can see the coming up from 0 to full 100. Okay, and I think this is very boring. You can put in some dynamic animations to make it pretty interesting and fast and enticing. So what you need to do is select these keyframes and delete them, letter D to delete, and then you can come over here. Assuming I want to put some keyframes, what I usually use is I use positions. So position, letter P to enable the position keyframes, and then you can just enable the, at this point maybe I want them to be 100 and 100 at this point, and then you can move down to the beginning, and over here to create the keyframes you can just select the image and select the text and maybe drag it up over here outside of the canvas, and then you can come down here as well and select it and move it outside the canvas depending on what kind of directions you want to have it. So I want it to come from the outside and then they will meet at the inside. Okay, so let's try to have a preview because now the movement have created the keyframes. You can see them over here, the two keyframes, they've already been created. So let's try to play it and see how the text is going to behave with these two position keyframes enabled. I think you can see it coming from the outside and it's coming pretty slow. If you want it to be pretty fast, you select the two keyframes and move them closer so they move a bit faster. So let's try it one more time to see. You can see they move a bit faster, but this is too robotic and not that interesting because they move in together and they stop together at the same time. Epic mentorship. I think we can put some animations to make it a bit interesting and very nice, because this one right now, let's try to look at the graph. Come over here, click on this graph and let's try to look at it. For example, you can come back and let's say we are trying to look at the graph of the of only the epic. Okay, epic over here, let's try to look at its graph. Okay, so you select the keyframes and then you can come to the graph and you can see the movement. You just move directly at this frame rate, okay, about 500 pixels per second, and then it just move down to 0. Okay, you just look at the speed. It moves this fast and then move down to 0. I think this is too linear, and just make sure for you to view this graph, you come over here and make sure you are on the speed graph over here. So for you to make it a bit dramatic and interesting, you can just come back, select the two keyframes, for example the epic one, and then you right click on it and then you can come to keyframe assistant and you can go to easy ease. Okay, that's what I usually use, easy ease. Easy ease means it's going to ease in with some animation and come in pretty fast. And let me show you from the graph now, you understand what I'm talking about. So what it does is it moves from 0 and pretty fast to this high speed, and then it slows down to this stopping point over here. I think this is pretty nice, and to make it much better, but let's have a preview of it first to have an idea of what we are talking about. Okay, so pay attention to the epic, how it comes in from 0 to pretty fast speed to the highest speed, and then dies down to 0. Okay, you can see it pretty fast, the epic. Okay, so let's try to make it dramatic a bit by selecting the epic again. Okay, and then coming back to the graph, and then come back over here, select this small dot, and you can come and move these to the left to kind of dramatize it. And you can see the movement, it moves pretty slowly fast to the peak, and then it gradually dies down, come down to 0 in a very dramatic way. So let's try to have a preview again and see what it does. Okay, just the epic, pay attention to the epic. Okay, look at it. Yeah, you can see the slowing in terms of the stopping. Okay, let me do that again. You can see it comes pretty fast and then it stops, while the mentorship comes in as a robot. Okay, so you can do that the same thing for the mentorship, because in easy ease there's a shortcut key. You can create a shortcut key on the easy ease. You can do that by just coming to edit button over here, go down to your keyboard shortcuts. You can come over here to search the shortcut key for easy ease. Okay, so you can see it over here. Easy ease usually is F9 if you have F9, and F9 is on the other side of my keyboard. So I personally created this Shift plus E to enable the easy ease. Okay, you can create yours also if you want, but I think Shift E also is pretty interesting. So you can have easy ease as Shift E, and then you can close. So to apply that to the mentorship part, you just select the keyframes and just hit on Shift E to apply the easy ease. So it becomes very easy for you to apply easy ease with just this shortcut. Okay, so you apply easy ease, and let's try to see both of them at the same time. You can see the dramatic coming in and stopping in the dramatic or graphical way. Okay, this is pretty fast, and then they slowly stop together. Okay, so you can do that. You can do the same for both of them at the same time. So let's try to undo the easy ease. Okay, of what we have done, you can select all of them at the same time, all the keyframes. You can come all the way, select both of them. You can select both of them at the same time, right click, and then come to keyframe assistant, and then you can come to easy ease, or you can use the shortcut key to apply it to both of them. And then you want to play around with the graph, you can just come down to this graph editor, and then select this tool, and then drag the two of them at the same time. Okay, can drag the two of them and they have the same effect at the same time. So let's go back and try to have a last preview. Okay, so let's have the preview, and you can see dramatically coming out. So one thing that I usually add to my text to stand out, to make it much better and interesting, is I add the what we call the motion blur. Okay, motion blur. Right now at any given point along the way before it hits the ending point, you can see the text very clearly. Okay, but when you attach motion blur, it becomes much more professional. The movement becomes dramatic and very professional. Okay, so I add the motion blur. You can add motion blur by coming over here to enable motion blur, and you can come to the text. You can just click on this to enable the motion blur, and you can enable for both of them the motion blur. So you can see that by trying to move these features, you can see a little bit of the blurry nature, as if you have some blurry nature in your eyes. Okay, and that is the motion blur, just to show you how fast and very professional it can come in and stop. So let's try to have it one more time. You can see it. Yeah, so this is it, and I think this is kind of professional and nice. So all you need to do, you can be very creative with Adobe After Effects. It all boils down to you, what you want to use it for. But this is the most basic tutorial in terms of editing text and adding very key animations to it to look and appear professional. But I think for this tutorial, that does it for adding text and putting some animation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Alright guys, so in our last class we talked about animating text in Adobe After Effects. Now in this class we are going to be talking about animating shapes in Adobe After Effects. So the last one was animating this very text, where we show the animation from beginning to the end. At this, we're putting some pretty nice animations to have it come in and stay on the canvas. But in today's tutorial, we're going to look at animating shapes. Okay, so to animate shapes, we need to create a new composition. We can just start by coming to composition over here and click on create new composition. We just give it a name. Instead of animating text, right now we're going to make it animating shapes. and we did enter everything at default. We can just go ahead and put some background to our canvas so that it looks pretty good. Come to the shapes over here and just long press the shape and just take the rectangle tool, and then we can just drag and drop it somewhere here. So we can feel free to change in any color by coming over here to change the fill color. It usually takes in the last color that you've used, so you can change to any color. For example, you can come to something like this. I pretty much like something like this. We can have it as our shape or our background. So we can click out, or we can hit on Ctrl V to come back to the selection tool, and we can move around to make sure that the background is filled completely. All right, so you can see it over here. If you like, you can rename the layer. You can just come over here and right click and say rename, and then you can call it background. All right, so you can click out. Next is you can click out of the background. We can add different shapes. Okay, right now we can come over here and just come to this rectangle, click and hold it, and then we can select, maybe we want to put in ellipse tool. We can do ellipse if you want, okay, as a whole on its own. And usually shapes are usually not making much sense until they have a given color attached to them. So in this one, we don't have any color, so you can come to the fill color and select any color of your choice, and you can see it stands out pretty nice. So this is how to make an ellipse. But if you want to make a circle, perfect circle, you have to hold down the shift key in this case, and then you can draw the circle just like so. Okay, pay attention to the coloration. Okay, right now we can change the fill color at this point. Just make sure that you are on this particular ellipse. Okay, because we are working on the same shape. Okay, you can see we have ellipse 1 and ellipse 2. If we click out of it, then we can draw the shapes independently. So let me give you an example, but let's try to change this color so we can have something much different. Something like this. I think it's okay. So these are the same ellipse, okay, under the same layer that we just kickstarted. We have ellipse 1 and we have ellipse 2. In each case you select, you'll be able to see the shape highlighted because they are on the same scale. So but if you click out, you can be able to draw a different shape on its own independently. So you can come over here, hold down the shift key, you can draw a polygon tool by just selecting it, and then you can come over here, draw a polygon tool. Like I said, it takes in the color of the last set, and you can see it over here as a new layer. You can right click here and come to rename, and then you can call it the polygon. Okay, actually this is a pentagon. Okay, if I get my arithmetics correctly, so this is a pentagon because it had 5 sides to this very shape. Okay, in cases when you want to make it a different number of sides, for example, you want to make it 3 sides, maybe a rectangle or more than that, you can just come over, make sure you are on the polygon or whatever shapes you call it. You can come over here, select it, and then you can come to this small arrow. You can see content. Okay, so usually when you click, you will see polygon. When you come to this small arrow, you can see content, and you click on content, you see polystar. So you can click on polystar and then come all the way over here to polystar path. Okay, so polystar path will give you the points. Right now it has 5 sides or 5 points, so you can just select, and if you want to make it a triangle, you can just make it 3, and once you hit enter, this is going to be converted to a triangle. Okay, so you have the access to all the other properties like the position. You can move it in the X direction if you want, to as far as you want, and then you can move it in the Y direction as well, as far as you want. So this is basically some of the key properties. You can play around with the rotations as well. You can rotate it along just like so, very nicely done. You can do that. You can play around with the outer radius, okay, increase or decrease the outer radius accordingly, and then you can increase the outer roundness. Okay, so you can play around with the outer roundness as well and have something like this or something like this. So pretty much anything, any shape, you're just free to go come along and play around with the properties and the features over here. So this is the polystar path. You can define anything you want accordingly, and you can put some stroke also if you want. You have the stroke, you can add some stroke. For example, you can add the stroke width. Right now it's set to 0. You can increase the stroke width to this much stroke, and you can change the coloration as well from this color, from this white to this red. Okay, you can say okay to this, and you can see it has changed the color. Or you can use the color picker also to pick on any color. You can play around with the opacity of the coloration. You can play around, increase or decrease it accordingly. All right, you can do it from here, or you can do it from the top over here. You can click and add stroke also if you want, but I think I prefer it at white color, and I prefer it without stroke at this point. So you can just zero the stroke width to take it back to the normal shape as it was. So this is how to play around with the features. You can check around the line caps, the dashes. If you want to play around, add some dashes, you can add. You can come down to web, taper, and other field properties over here. So usually there are two transforms. You can close on this and close on the stars. So you can see this is polystar transform, specifically aligned for this polystar, for this shape that we have. And then we have the general transform down here, which we've explained in the previous video, where you can play around with the anchor point. You can play around with the position, global position of this particular shape. Okay, the X and Y coordinates, you can move around and you can scale it up and down accordingly as you so wish. If you like, you can unlink this, so you can scale the X and scale the Y separately as you so wish, or you have them linked and they increase and decrease together. Okay, so it all depends on you. And we have the rotation also at the global scale. So this happens the same way if you have the shapes located under the same shape or the same platform. Okay, so for example, this is our polygon. For example, the other one that we have these two shapes located, you can come over here, you can see the ellipse 1 and ellipse 2. Okay, all on the same features. So each one of them has its own properties. You can see the ellipse 2, you can see the properties, and you can have its own separate transform over here. If you want to scale it up or down, you can play around with it separately. And you have the second one as well. If you want to have its properties, you can have the path. If you want to play around with the path, the sizing, the position, you can see the second one. You can play around with the position in the X and Y coordinates as well. So these are very, very easy features that you can play around and have an understanding of what they do. Okay, so this is the basics of the shapes, how to bring in shapes and play around with their features. So right now, what I want to do is I want us to create a little bit of an intro text for our maybe channel or something. You can just try to create a very simple intro and then have it animate in this very tutorial. Okay, so let's try to hit out and then maybe create something simple. Let's unshow this and unshow these two as well. So let's try to create something simple by just coming over to the shape icon, the polygon icon over here, come to rectangle, and then you can drag it along just like so. You can hit out over here, or you can hit the V icon and have it come back to the selection tool. You can select and center it just like so. If you want to center it, you can center it just like so. So what I want is I can change the coloration of this. You can change it from this color to maybe white color. Okay, so it stands out a little bit. I want to create an animation whereby we can have this shape move from this 0 point, okay, to this much big. Okay, you can just move from this point to this point. So this is the shape that we are working on, this rectangle. Okay, this shape layer 2. So we can just select it, and then hit the scale option, hit the letter S to bring in the scale like we have explained in the shortcut keys. You can hit the letter S and we have the scale over here, and then you can see we can scale it up. Okay, so we can add the keyframe. At this point, I want it to be 100% or 0. Anyone you can start. So let's say we want it to be 0 at this point. So we just start a keyframe and then we define what the keyframe does. So it goes to 100, but this is not what I want. I don't want something like this. I want to unlink them so they work together. Okay, so they pretty much work together. So I bring them back to normal. So let's take it back to normal. And at this point, what I want you to do, I want to unlink this because I want it to move from the sides, not on both sides completely. So I want it to move from 0 to 100. Okay, so I move the playhead to maybe here and then I give it 100. Okay, can maybe zoom it to 100 and then it zooms out. Okay, so you can see the second keyframe. So we can just, when we come back here, you can see it's going to be something like this, moving all the way to the bigger size. Okay, so we can bring it closer so that it moves pretty much fast. You can see it moves a bit faster. And I don't want something like this. It looks kind of too boring for this to just move fast and stop like that. We need to put some little animations to this. Okay, so let's put in some little animations to this. And how do we do that? We can select the keyframes, right click on them and come to keyframe assistant, and then we can just come to easy ease, and it's going to easy ease all of them instead of the normal straight line that we have, which is something like this. let's select the keyframes and come and show the velocity graph, the graph editor. You can see it usually moves from this much speed down to 0. We want to put in the easy ease format so that it becomes a little bit more animated. So you just select it and right click, come to keyframe assistant and then easy ease, and you can see the graph. If you go back, it's now moving from 0 to the peak gradually up to the peak, and then move from the peak gradually down to 0. Okay, so you can see that we can make it a bit glaring by just coming over here and shifting it, and we can see it pretty much over here. So this is not actually what I want. I want something that can be a little bit dramatic. It starts, so we can select on this like we've done in the other videos. Select on the right edge over here and just click on this and drag it to the left, and you can see it starts pretty much fast to the top point, which is about 291% per second, and then it moves pretty much down gradually down to 0. Okay, so let's try to have a look based on this graph at the behavior. So you can see the behavior. Okay, it pretty much moves fast at the beginning and then it dies out to 0 gradually. Okay, so this is how to animate this very shape, but to make it more meaningful, we have to add some text to this so that it makes it more meaningful. Okay, so how do we add some text? Usually we do Command T on Mac, so we can enable the text tool, and we can select over here and just type Epic Mentorship, for example, something like this. We can play around with the features, or we can hit out, and then we can have our shape and then move it into the white shape, white color. Okay, so we can use it we can reduce the size from the edges, or we can come over here and reduce the size directly. Okay, so we can increase or decrease the size from this very edge. Okay, and let's say I like it at this point, and then we can change the coloration. Right now you can just use this keyframe to make it black, or you can come over here to the global one and change it to any color of your choice. Let's say I like this color, and we click on OK, and you can see it perfectly. But then we don't want to keep it so boringly available like this. Let's get back to the main tab. You can see at this point, once you click, you can see the text is already there, but I want to kind of animate it also to move along with the text. So let's put on some keyframes to the shape. Now we want to do some opacity keyframe. So we want it to move from 0 opacity to 100. So let's hit on the letter T to bring in opacity as our keyframe. So let's say at this point we want it to start the opacity at this point. Let's say at this point we enable the opacity and then we make it at 0. Okay, so at this point it is 0. Okay, and let's say when we move to close to the end, just about a frame after the end, and then we can give it another opacity. We can zoom this to 100 and it's now full opacity, and then when we try to play it, you can see it's going to move in pretty fast with the opacity. And I think this is kind of nice in terms of the animation. Okay, so you can see it moves pretty fast and nice. Okay, Epic Mentorship, but we can put in some motion blur so that it can give it some more meaning. Okay, make it appear much more nice. You can put in some motion blur from here. You can add it to the scale on the shape. Okay, so you can add some motion blur to it, and it just appears as if it is not a pretty shape until the end. Okay, so you just add a little bit of motion blur, and then we can add some motion blur also to the text. Okay, so it appears a bit nice and fantastic. So let's put in some of the easy ease feature as well, so it also appear a bit animated. So we can come to keyframe assistant and easy ease this as well, and then we can come to this graph and then come over here and drag it to the left. Okay, so it becomes much better. So let's try to play it one more time. You can see it, and I think this kind of looks pretty cool in terms of having an intro on this, but then we can make it much better. Let's try to animate a piece of shape as well to this very text that we've added. But if we have a circle, come into the canvas and then hit on this our shape and then move out just like so. It just kind of come in from the edge, from the side, and then hit on this and then move out directly. So let's try to do that and see the effect. Okay, so let's click out of the whole thing, and then you can come back to the shape over here. We can just select and hold it, and then we can select the ellipse tool. We can come over here. We can just press on the shift key to draw our circle. Okay, perfect circle, something like this, and then we can change the fill color from here to something like a red color. Okay, so a red color, can make more sense. Let's say a red color. All right, and say okay to this, and then we can have it animated. So let's remove this graph and then have it come from here. So we can see this is the ellipse. We want to put in the animation. Let's say at this point, we want it to start at this point and then goes out. So let's hit on the letter V to come back to the selection tool, and then we can move it to this point. We want it to come at this point, hit on this point, come from here, hit on this point, and then move out directly, just like so. Okay, so just pay attention to how we are going to do it. So we can select the keyframe, okay, select the shape, and then we can enable the position tool, okay, or the position keyframe. So we hit on letter P to enable position, and we can all the way at this point define the keyframe. We can just hit on the keyframe, but what we want at this point, this shape to do is we want it to start from here, and then we can move a little bit, maybe up to this point, and then we want it to come in, okay, to hit on this point, just like so. It just hit here, and then we move a little bit out again, and then we want it to move out of the frame, just like so. Just move out. Okay, so let's try to play it and see how it's going to look like. At this point, it's going to look a little bit rough, something like this. It's a bit too fast and rough. Okay, so you can play around with it. You get the message, you get the information I'm trying to send. You can just move them around, and you can try to move around, something like this. So let's try it. This is a bit fast. Okay, so you can just pretty much play around with it until you get it exactly as you want it. Yeah, something like this. We can slow it down a little bit, and then we can add motion blur to it also. Okay, so let's go to the shape and then add some motion blur. You can see it's blurring a little bit. Okay, so let's say it moves from here, just like so, but we don't want it to be something like this. So let's select the keyframes, come to the graph over here. You can see the behavior. I can come over here, select the keyframes, select all the 3 keyframes, right click and come back to keyframe assistant, and then give it an easy ease feature, and then we can come to the graph to see what we have. Okay, so you can see it moves each point. It moves from 0 to pretty fast to the highest point, then it moves to the 0 point. At this point it comes into 0, and then it moves. Let's try to move it a bit and see, have a look. You can see it moves pretty fast until the highest point, then it gets to hit this point at 0, and then it moves fast up to the highest point as well, and then move out slowly, just like so. Okay, so but what we want to pretty much play around with the edges. So we can move this up if you want. We can move this up as well if you want, so we can change the path as it moves. So let's have it move a bit fast and then come down a bit fast as well. So let's try to play it and see. Yeah, I think this is pretty much what I want, something like this to move a bit faster. Okay, so you can select this and move it inwards to just have it animate a little bit. Okay, so it doesn't move in a linear form, it moves a little bit in a Bezier form. Okay, a little bit Bezier form. So let's go back and try to create a move around with the position so that it just align with our other shape down. So you select all of them and move. So let's try to have it move to play it from the beginning. I think that is pretty much it, and I think I like what I see. So this is basically how to create different kind of animation in shapes. You feel free to just give it a try. This is a lot of information, but you can use it according to your creativity. You can easily use this and then play around with it. Okay, so this concludes it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright, so the last part of this tutorial is how to export our footage using After Effects. Okay, if you have a video you've edited and you are starting with whatever you have, it's time to export the video in After Effects. We can bring in a video, for example, from the project panel over here. We may have a video footage that we can put so that the work can look complete, and a video clip. So we have one video clip here. Like for example, I have this product video, and I can easily drag it and drop it into the canvas, and you can see it over here. Product dropped down into the timeline. Okay, so we can just, because this is playing above the text that we've just shown, because Adobe After Effects, of course, is a software that works based on the layer. Okay, so whatever is above is what is going to show at the top of the entire clips. So now we have to move this video clip a little bit down, okay, up to this background. It's not going to go below the background, but just slightly above the background, and we drop it and we can see everything coming up at the top. Okay, so let's say we go back a little bit and then try to play it. Okay, you can see with the animations and the shape animation that we've just created, you can see everything coming out so nicely and professionally. So assuming we are starting with this and we want to export our video in After Effects in MP4 format, okay, in MP4 format, this is the very easiest way to export video here. But the normal way, if you want to export a video, is usually to come over to composition over here and you can see add to render queue. Okay, so if you add to render queue over here, you will see the render the project you want to render, and you can see the settings. Usually it's best settings. You can just click and you can see the best settings over here. I don't usually touch anything here. One of the key disadvantages of exporting with these settings is that you're going to have very big size in the file you are exporting. It's going to be very big, and even though the quality is going to be high, but the size is too much. Okay, it's a very big file. With just these few seconds of a video, you're going to have very big file size. Okay, and then you have the output module. You can have the output quality. You can check on these as well if you want to check it around. But the usual way is once you just come over here, specify the properties, and you can just start exporting directly. Okay, so what I usually do is I make sure that I come over to composition, and then I export using Adobe Media Encoder. Okay, Adobe Media Encoder is one of the package that comes with Adobe packages. So if you have it, you can just go ahead and install it, and it's just basically ease the exporting process. It's going to give you a very cool video, very light and very high in quality, and it's going to be in MP4. Usually this default method is going to give you a mov.mov file. Okay, this is the format, the output format. But with Media Encoder, you are going to have the option to specify which format you want to export. So I can come to add to render queue, or I can say add to Adobe Media Encoder, and I just click on this, and it's going to kickstart my Adobe Media Encoder and add it as a queue, and then I can specify the properties just like so, just like the way I do in Adobe Premiere Pro. So feel free to give it a try. So right now it has just added my video. You can see it over here, and it's going to be exporting it in H.264. If you don't want this format, you can just click on this, and it's going to kickstart the normal exporting features where you can select what kind of property that you want to set in, just like in Adobe Premiere Pro. So you can see the exporting settings just like in Adobe. You can see the format over here. You have a range of formats to select. Usually I go with H.264, which is the MP4 format. You just select H.264, and if you have any presets that you've set, maybe you've saved over time, maybe from Adobe Premiere Pro or from somewhere, and you save it as a preset, you can easily bring in that preset and just attach the preset settings. What settings you have that you like your videos to be exported in, you can just check on the preset over here and just attach it, or you can just save a given setting as a preset. You can just do that from here, and then you can add any comments. You can specify the output name. You can just click on this, specify the output name and the location wherever you want to save it. You just specify location, and you can just go ahead and just save it directly. So for example, mine is going to go into this After Effects, Adobe After Effects, and I can create a folder and call it exporting in MP4, and I can just create this folder, and it's going to be in this folder. So over here I'm going to name it exporting in MP4, right? And you can just say save over here, and make sure everything is set to default. If you have anything that you want to change, you want to vary anything, any of the properties, you can come to video properties over here. You can change the width, the height, and so much more in terms of the video properties. You can check them around here. All the properties you can change accordingly as how you want it. One of the key features is you have the idea of how much is going to be the estimated size of your video at the end of it all. So let's try to export with this. This is the estimated size, 72 megabytes. Once you say okay to this, it's going to come back to this point. You can change the output file position from here. If you don't want it to be exported over here, you can change it by just clicking on this. And once you have everything set up, you can just come to this green icon and just click on it to start the queue. And you can see it starts the rendering process. This is going to be pretty fast because it's a short clip video. Okay, so one of the advantages you should pay attention to is with the usage of Adobe Media Encoder, you will be able to go back. You can minimize this and go back to your video and continue with the editing process, and even do some further editing. You can queue up all your videos at the same time. You can multiple videos on this same platform, and you can export it just like so. So right now it has finished the export. You can check on this. You can see, well, once it says done, it means that's finished the export. You just go ahead and check the location and you can find it over here. It's just been exported. You can see the size 69.9 megabytes as against the other one. If you export using the other settings, it's going to be pretty huge in size. Okay, so right now, if you want to follow the other method that we have explained, you just come back to your Adobe After Effects, come to composition and say add to queue and render, and it's going to bring you over here with these basic settings. All you need to do is to specify the location, where should it save to. You can come over here, you can just go ahead and say export, not in MP4. So you can now create another folder. For example, we can say it's going to be in this folder, Adobe After Effects, but then we give it another export raw, for example. And then we can hit on OK, and then we can say export. You can see the format is going to be .mov, and you say save, and you can see it over here. You can start the rendering process pretty fast, and you can add to queue in Adobe Media Encoder also from here if you want. But let's try to export using this method and then try to compare with the other method in Adobe Media Encoder and see the difference. So you can render this, you can see the process. Okay, and at the end, once it's finished, we will try to compare the two exporting and see the difference. Okay, so right now it has finished the export. So let's try to check and see both of them that have been exported. We can minimize this, and then we can come over here. We can go ahead and check and compare the two. So this is in MP4, which is 70 megabytes. Let's try and check the other one. So this is export raw, and you can see the file size. Okay, so this is 532 megabytes as against the Adobe Media Encoder, which is just 70 megabytes. So this is quite preferred if you are working in Adobe After Effects. So just try to export in MP4 or using the Adobe Media Encoder. So thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.